Let's solve the problem 1/3 divided by 3/5. Now I love math, but I'm not a huge fan of fractions. So let's just skip this problem. Just kidding. Dividing fractions is an important skill. So I'm going to teach you guys a little trick you can use anytime you're asked to divide two fractions. Now that trick is to take this first fraction and multiply it by the reciprocal or the multiplicative inverse of your second fraction. The important thing to remember is that we're going to take this division problem and we're going to change it into a multiplication problem. But step number one in that process is to find the reciprocal of that second fraction. In this example, that second fraction is this 3/5. And again, we're trying to find the reciprocal of this fraction. And a reciprocal is just a multiplicative inverse. That's just a fancy way of saying we're going to take the numerator and denominator and we're going to flip them to make a new fraction. So if 3 is in the numerator of my original fraction, then 3 needs to be in the denominator of its reciprocal. And the same thing is going to go with 5. Since 5 is in the denominator of this fraction, then for its reciprocal, 5 needs to be in the numerator. So we now have 3/5 and 5/3. And these two fractions are reciprocals of each other. But I'm going to circle this 5/3 because that's the important one. That's the one we were trying to find in step 1 so that we could go back and we can rewrite our original problem statement. So in step number 2, let's actually rewrite this problem. And again, we're going to change this division problem into a multiplication problem. So when we rewrite it, this first fraction, and this goes for any time we're dividing two fractions, this first fraction is going to stay the same. So when I rewrite my problem, I'm just going to drag down this 1/3. Now here's where the changes come in. This division sign is going to change into a multiplication sign. And instead of being followed by 3/5, this multiplication sign is going to be followed by the reciprocal of 3/5. And in step 1, we found the reciprocal of 3/5. That's 5/3. So we now have a completely new problem statement. It changed from 1/3 divided by 3/5 to 1/3 times the reciprocal of 3/5, which was 5/3. So we now have a multiplication problem we need to solve. And finding 5/3 of 1/3 is just a little easier to figure out than how many times 3/5 goes into 1/3. So in step number 3, let's actually perform that multiplication because that multiplication is going to give us our answer. And anytime we're multiplying two fractions, we can simply take the product of our numerators and put it over the product of our denominators. So our answer is going to be a fraction as well. We have a 1 times a 5 in the numerator, 1 times 5, and in our denominator we'll have a 3 times a 3. Now we just have some simple multiplication we need to finish up so we can simplify. 1 times 5 in the numerator is equal to 5. And then 3 times 3 in the denominator is equal to 9. So we just found that 1/3 divided by 3/5 is equal to 5/9.